Good. Okay. Great. Okay, today we're going to talk about the new WASC tool. It changed about 3 times over the last 2 years when we started this process, so I was typing on here just a little earlier to get an idea if you all had actually seen the new tool. So a lot of the slides will be full of words because I've taken the actual verbiage from the tool so that you can kind of get familiar with the perspective. It's very different from previous WASCs. Okay, so the first slide we're going to start with is the action plan. If you come from a school where you've had a change in leadership, and we've all kind of gone through a lot in the last couple of years, you might want to go back and make sure that you know where you're at with your action plan, because this is what's going to be the bulk of Chapter 2, and that's your opportunity to define the challenges that you've encountered and why you've taken, perhaps the turn that you've taken and the direction that you've taken your school. So, and I say that because our group consisted of 6 people, but only 2 were familiar with adult education. So we had 2 people that came from, one from university, one from a Cal State university, one private, one Cal State. We had an ROP, we had a fairly new adult school administrator, and so it's really imperative that when you're writing this report, you're writing it with the perspective that you are going to have a team that may not be from adult education. There's just not that many of us left. So when you see all these slides, remember they'll be archived. So the verbiage, you can get that, you can go back and get it. So starting with the end in mind, the action plan will drive the student learning. You're going to want to update the action plan, like I said earlier, to be sure that that's in line with your current vision, especially if you've had changes in leadership. And it's really important that the goals reflect the goals of all stakeholders. And what I mean by that is if you've had meetings, department meetings and such, where these things have been discussed, be sure you have those available in evidence. So you have binders with dates, with agendas, meeting minutes, and such. And your action plan really needs to be specific, including timelines for completion, the people responsible, what reporting instruments you plan to use, and any benchmarks that you will be using for your measurements. Okay, so is everyone okay? They can hear me all right? We're not having any problems there? We're okay? Okay. So has your school attained goals specified in the previous plan? And like I said, if there's been a shift, your opportunity to define that is in Chapter 2. That's key, because that is what's going to set the tone for that team who may come in, remember, without a vision, without the history of adult education since 2008, or they may never have been on an adult school campus. So, you need to be thinking about. Can you see the chat pods? I'm not sure. Can you tell me, Charisse, I'm reading what you're writing to me, and I want to be sure that they can see that. Yes, you will get a hard copy of the slides. Okay, so here's the first opportunity to respond. If you've gone through your perfect, thanks, Barbara. If you've gone through leadership, like I said, this is when you're going to document this in Chapter 2. But what are your benchmarks going to be to measure accomplishment? This was key. We were really surprised at the detail that the team really hit this home, and I'll explain more to you as we get going in these different slides. But think about your benchmarks. What are you using as evidence to really educate your staff, but also your team, because they don't remember. You're going to come with a perspective that they don't know about adult education. Okay, so let's go down here to the next slide. Okay, so the focus groups. This is one thing that is pretty much the same from the previous WASC tool. There's 4 focus groups: your curriculum, your instruction, use of assessment, student support services. Now those will all be put into Chapter 3, and within Chapter 3 you'll have 10 criteria. Okay, and so as we go through Chapter 3, we're going to talk about that criteria, and you're going to have a little bit of an idea. Like I said, I'll use some of the verbiage from the actual tool, which you can download from the WASC website. And I would encourage you not to wait until you go for your WASC trainings, because honestly, those were worthless for us. This tool is really what you need. You just, I know you have to go and everything, but the verbiage and the perspective in the current tool is so different from a comprehensive site that you sort of, I think, need to get familiar with what they're going to be asking for, so you have all those pieces in place well before the visit comes, but even before the school year begins, so that as you're planning those planning meetings, you know where you're going to be taking your staff. So all staff needs to be involved in the review of the school mission statement. That's criterion 1. They want to know about your mission statement. They want to know specific things like who was involved in it, is it measurable, does the mission statement align and match with the needs of the student population. So those really nice flowery mission statements that we used to have before are kind of out the window. It's really about a mission statement that's measurable, that sums up who you are. And when we did these meetings, we had our 4 focus group meetings, but prior to that, before the focus group meetings, I met along with the other AP with all of our staff, and we did it cross-curricular so that we could mix ESL with high school diploma, with ABE, and that way we could really hear a lot of what the concerns of the staff was, and that they could read the tool. We made copies for everyone so they knew what was expected, so they knew why we were reviewing the mission statement. They understood that the mission statement had to be measurable, and then in those meetings, and those took about 4 months. We met once or twice a week, and we provided a retired sub. We had someone come in who was familiar with adult education, and they subbed the class so that the teachers could be pulled out. And then we also used a administrator to sub. So we're fairly large, and we were able to do that. So we took advantage of our administration in that manner. So in those meetings, that was a great opportunity, because as we met one-on-one, we started to develop our list of strengths, and and where we needed our weaknesses, where we needed to improve, what they felt the weaknesses were. Okay, so we talked about your mission statement, and is it measurable, and is it central to your institutional planning? This was a question that came up. They wanted to know, the team wanted to know how we derived it and how we used it, which was an interesting question. If you just think about that, it's difficult, because do you bring your mission statement into your budget meetings? Are you looking at your mission statement as you're allocating your resources? And then how does the achievement of the flows, which are now the new the SLOs are new, with the new tool. They're no longer called ESLers. They're student learning outcomes, and they really want to see how those connect to the school-wide action plan. So they wanted to also know, did the CFAs, did our common formative assessments align with the syllabi, and how did those align with the student learning outcomes? Okay, and I have a question here about whether or not we included fee-based classes in the process. I'm not really clear, Christine, what you mean by that. If you could just type a little bit more, I'll try to answer that question. And I think we had a pod, can you see that pod, the pod chat there? We were under the assumption we did not need a new mission statement, and I was surprised, if you take your 10 criteria and you just look at, each criteria should be about 10%, but we really felt like the mission statement, we were graded like 40%. So if it seems like I'm kind of, hitting on that, I am, because it was really central to everything that, we were asked about. I have a question here about, are all the syllabi, the teacher's syllabi looked at? They were requested. They didn't have time to look at all of them, but they felt that not everybody had a syllabus, and so that was written into one of our areas of improvement. So although they couldn't get around to see them all, they did spot check. Okay, so moving on to Criterion 2. The organizational infrastructure is the heading for Criterion 2. And one of the most helpful things here is to actually do a graphic organizer or flow chart. They're going to want to know in what way does the leadership create a positive learning environment. They want to know, and I thought that was a very interesting question, in a collegial and collaborative atmosphere. So you need to have examples and be able to show evidence of this. How is the organizational structure evaluated? So are you using your quarterly reports to CASAS to evaluate whether you're getting your benchmarks met as well as your student learning outcomes, or are you looking at completion numbers to the state? Okay, so some of the things that they look for are established infrastructure policies and procedures, things that might come from the district, any board minutes, your attendance policies, anything you have in regards to like a teacher orientation handbook, student handbook, orientation videos, assessment calendars, anything that you use that provides the stability and consistency for your institution. And like I said, they looked at all the evidence. It was amazing how much time they spent here. They also wanted to look at the employment of our staff. They were very curious to know how our district hires. We're a paperless district, and that all happens online, and they actually went online and tried to apply for a job. It was kind of interesting. They want to know how you determine your FTDs, or, for example, how do we verify qualifications of applicants? That was interesting. So to what extent does the institution have a written code for professional ethics for all personnel and communicate that effectively with them? Anything you have in terms of, handouts for that is great. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're on Criterion 3. Institution develops personnel policies and procedures that are clearly communicated to all employees. Have all personnel policies available for review, as well as your classified and certificated evaluations. The key here is that you have a systematic review process in place. And how does the institution define effective teaching in the evaluation process? Faculty members, they're looking for, now this is actually out of the tool, so there's a lot of verbiage here, but I want you to understand it's because I want you to get a flavor for what they're asking. The tone is so different from the old focus on learning. So, and I think it's important to realize that with this post-secondary tool that we're under now, we're under the same measurement tool as we would be at a junior college or community college. So this is why some of the wording has changed, and I think this may be why we got people from university and from community college. So keep that in mind, that's the lens that this needs to be looked through when you're planning for your staff and how you're going to accomplish these meetings. So in Criterion 3, you can see there that faculty members take ownership of student progress towards achieving stated school-wide learner outcomes. What are the roles of all staff in the development of the SLOs? Provide documentation. And how often did the staff meet to discuss the SLOs and analyze student learning data? Or provide any documentation that you did meet and what that meeting contained. So what was the discussion like? So your mission statement is going to be your primary umbrella, and then underneath that you're going to have your student learning outcomes, which need to be measurable. Okay, someone just typed here on the side that they're looking at initial WASC accreditation and the toolkit I found on the internet. Okay, if you go to the wasc.org, you'll see under adult schools, or let's see, I think it may be under post-secondary, and that's where you're going to find it. But the verbiage is here, and maybe afterwards, maybe Charisse can provide a link, or I can provide a link to that website. Here, let me type this on here so Charisse can see this. I think in many ways the new tool is easier, but in many ways it's more difficult because it's just so different. It's not intuitive to what we do. But because we're graded just on these 10 criteria, in some ways I think it becomes much easier because you can see exactly what the indicator is and then what the discussion questions are to be with your staff. So those are only recommended discussion questions, but they really help to guide the direction that you want to go in. So the next slide, the institution provides all personnel with appropriate opportunities for professional development. This is still within Criterion 3. This was huge. What I did, we just put an Excel sheet in there of all the staff development that we've been to. So our district got on board with professional learning communities in '09, and we've attended as much as we possibly can or could, and anything that had to do with district trainings, things that anything like that, anything I went to, any staff went to, all of our classified staff trainings, all of that was put into that criterion so that they could see exactly what we did. And then after each indicator, you do have to answer that particular indicator in order to meet the criterion. So one of the questions within that criterion was, how is the support staff included in meetings and processes to engage them as important stakeholders in the learning programs of the school? And you need to provide evidence again. So if you're sending your classified to trainings, you need to document that. But if you can't do that, if you have a computer teacher on campus that might be able to teach them some, Excel or some Access, or if they do any training to update their skills in Publisher or anything like that, you can provide that evidence, the days that they were trained and how long and who attended, that sort of thing. And then finally, the relevance is, what impact does a professional development have on improving teaching and learning? And how does the institution evaluate that improvement? And they really do want to see, are you using pre-test and post-test? Are you using common formative assessments? And is the school as a whole on board? And if they're not, it's okay. For us, we have one department that's farther ahead, we have one department that's lagging behind, but I think it's just really important that you are honest about that, because they're going to see it, when they come out, and that's an opportunity for discussion. And they have those discussions within the focus group. So it all comes out. It's good to get it out there and have them have a really good idea of where your school is at before they come. The school's curriculum must be relevant to the mission of the school. Again, there's the mission statement. I mean, some of this document is very repetitive. And I think in a way that's really good, but in a way, you can miss opportunities to talk about some of the things that you're doing. And every opportunity we have, we really need to toot our own horn. So, they want to know that the curriculum is relevant and that it ties in with the SLOs, and that connects directly with your student learning outcome. And you really have to have evidence. One of the things that they really wanted to keep grinding us about was they wanted a documented curricular map, and this documented curricular map, I just emailed Lee Duncan while they were here, and he was great. He typed right back and said, adult schools are different, you're not going to have that, and I printed it out and handed it to the team. So if you feel during their visit like, they might be asking for things that are not relevant to adult education, don't be bashful. Get on your email and email Lee. He's great. He'll get right back to you, and then you have it in writing. I mean, he's probably going to kill me if he knows that I'm telling everybody to email him. But I emailed him 3 times over the course of our planning process. And the time that the WASC team was here, he got back to me every time. He was very accommodating. So I think, as long as you don't, wear out your welcome, you'll be fine. But it is important, because we come from a different world than these people are coming from, for the most part. And I think as more and more adult schools close, there's going to be people coming to do these walks that are not, they just don't have the background. They don't have the history of adult education. So, okay, back to this criterion 4. It's really important that you discuss the involvement of the faculty in the process of the curriculum review. They want to know about curriculum. It's huge. They want to know what you're using. Be sure that what you have in the classroom is what is on that course of study, and that's what's on the syllabus. I know that all of us have, you know, our little file cabinet that we like to do special things, but we just told our staff that, you know, this isn't the time. We really need to be following a course of study, and we need to be using material that we're all using so that we can actually measure these outcomes and see if, with a pre-test and a post-test, if we can affect change for the students, and we need to document that. So this is the time to really hone that in and get rid of all that extra stuff that you might be using, because it will dilute your data. You're not going to know if you're making a difference, if your gains are measurable, you know, because you don't know what people are using. So how do you know that one teacher is making gains with, you know, something that everybody else is using, or are they just doing their own thing? I mean, it's just really important that everybody's on the same page. So, and finally on this slide, I think it's important that how are the decisions made to ensure all staff and students have access to support, the technology, the learning labs, that sort of thing. So that's key. Okay, so we're going to go on here to the next slide. Criterion 5. How much of the teaching is research-based? This was an interesting, I thought, an interesting criterion. They want to know things like that the school provides a high level of instruction with appropriate breadth, depth, rigor, and sequencing for all programs and courses. You know, how do faculty members keep current with instructional strategies and methodologies? Again, it's repetitive, but you can use what you did in the prior chapter, you know, to, you don't have to put it in the same format, but you can reiterate a lot of what you did. And then to what extent are teachers given support in developing differentiated teaching strategies to ensure all students' needs are addressed? We were asked a lot of questions about special ed. You know, so that's something that you need to be prepared for. What type of resources do you have on your campus? Do you have a sign language interpreter? Do you have the big screens for students who may be visually impaired? Do you have translators? You know, they wanted to know how many people on our campus spoke various languages. You know, so we have someone who speaks Punjab, and we have someone who speaks Chinese. You know, of staff. That's what they were really focusing on, so that students felt that they could communicate in their language when necessary. And so these types of things, you know, they want to know the teaching strategies, methodologies, and student performance. That all has to be documented with evidence. We kept binders of all of our meetings and such, and then they just poured over them. Okay, so continuing on with Chapter 5, this was big because this is your instructional program. So this is a meaty chapter. You know, is the institution actively engaged in integrating new technology into the instructional program of the school? To what extent does the institution have a policy in place to evaluate credits earned through an online program? Do you use online? And if you do, you know, what are you offering? And how are faculty trained in the use of technology? Again, that goes back to your you know, your previous chapter, or anything that you've done with professional development. And to what extent does the school offer online learning options or virtual experiences for students? You know, you might only have some of the virtual things that, if you have a nursing program, there's some things that you can do with virtual labs and virtual hospitals, but just about everybody that came on our team wanted to see online education. So that was an interesting discussion. You know, a lot of our schools don't have money, and we're limited. So that's again why that that chapter 2 and the history of adult ed is really important. Okay, the use of assessment. I think this is where adult schools have the opportunity to really shine. You know, we use the CASAS, and those who come from a comprehensive site or from adult, you know, like a university or the community college, they don't really realize, I think, how extensive CASAS is. And so here's your opportunity to talk about what we do with assessment. So clear learning outcomes are developed for each course so that success can be measured and students who are struggling can be identified and helped. So anything you use with KC classes, you know, diagnostic tools to target instruction, mention it. Any of your core competencies and specific learning outcomes, how are they developed? Talk about that. It's really important, you know, that they know that your courses are aligned to state standards and model program standards. Also, how are the courses regularly evaluated in regards to the depth, breadth, and rigor? Remember, that was again mentioned earlier. So, like I said, there will be some repetition in this. And if there's questions or I'm going too fast, please, you know, type. I'm watching at the same time to see if there's anybody that wants me to expand on it, any of these different slides. So Criterion 6, we're still in Criterion 6, and I had a pod that would come up here after, I think it was after slide 17, Charisse, is that right? Okay, now I can't see the slide. Can you take that, Charisse, can you take that down? Thanks. Okay, so the institution gathers learning data from multiple sources and disaggregates and analyzes the results, draws conclusions, and makes recommendations for change based on the assessment results. That is right out of Criterion 6, and specific, you know, specifically you're going to want to talk about how you use your CASAS results, you know, what happens in those discussions, what do they look like, how about exit exams, what are your KC results, are you keeping track of the students that you're transitioning, you know, how many are you transitioning? That was huge. Okay, so I have a question here I'm going to respond to. They didn't say anything about assessment for fee-based classes. We have very few fee-based classes, basically our CTE, and there wasn't time to look at our older adult. You know, most of the schools have reduced the size of the older adult, and so I think that you have an opportunity there to really discuss, you know, the financial implications of some of those classes and how many of us have to really go for the benchmarks now in order to backfill funding through WIA. So that wasn't ever a question, you know, as far as fees. We did have some students just, you know, talk about what great value adult education was. Our nursing program is about $5,000, and they just spoke up. I took them to see the clinical, the students at clinical at our county hospital one of the evenings that they were here, and then they met with the students after they had, when they were getting ready to have their reporting out time, and that was an awesome experience because, you know, it was in a small room where the team got to really just ask questions of the students, and those students were just spectacular. And that's where it really came across about, you know, the value of adult education, how much they were learning, what our NCLEX pass rates were, and that sort of thing. And I'm just responding to that. Yeah, that's no problem, because I can't see the Chad pot or pot chads or whatever very well. So, okay, so continuing on chapter 6, and this is, you know, again, pretty meaty the use of assessment. So student learning data is used to make educational changes that enable students to reach educational goals and achieve academic success. You want to know things like how do the faculty members use the formative assessments and summative assessments to modify the learning results, and to and how advanced are the PLCs. They want to know where you're at in the process. And it's okay if you're not there or you're not where you want to be, but be honest with them. And how has the analysis of the learning data impacted the instructional program of the school and improved learning levels for students? You know, these are this is verbiage straight out of the tool. They're right out of the indicators and the discussion questions. How does the school use assessment results to evaluate the effectiveness of the programs and courses it offers? Discuss the nature of the meetings, how student data has impacted instruction, and has there been a change in the effectiveness or the outcomes of the programs. So, you know, looking at your data, have you either added courses, have you changed maybe the format, maybe you've gone to online, have you done any surveys, surveys that may have helped to formulate changes that you want to make based on the data that you're seeing? This is your opportunity to have those discussions in Criterion 6. Also, they want to know how your assessment results are reported regularly to all stakeholders so that accountability can be maintained and that students' learning remains the focus of the school. And for most of us, you know, we do go to the city council meetings, and maybe we would request a proclamation for Adult Ed Week, or we might report out at our community advisory meetings on how our completions are going, and get input from the community on course offerings that we might want to offer. If you recognize students in school assemblies, these are, the things of evidence that they're going to want to see. And how does the institution rely on assessment results for institutional planning? Again, it goes back to your action plan. And when you look at those assessment results, are you making revisions? And are you using that for your resource allocation? Or are you using your mission statement? You know, how does that all tie together? And again, you're going to have repetition. Okay, Criterion 7. This is student support services. I think this is another opportunity for adult schools to shine. We do a great job with student support services. I think, you know, all of our students are for the most part returning, you know, to school as an adult, and you know, anything that you offer, if you offer financial aid or learning resources, academic counseling, anything you have in terms of tech support or health services, this is your chapter to discuss that. If you offer any type of financial aid presentation, if you help filling out the FAFSA, if you do any field trips, you know, if you're taking students up to see the community college, anything you offer with regards to newsletters about your school, any classroom visitations you might have from the public, you know, like maybe the health department comes in and talks about vaccination clinics, anything you use in that manner to inform your students, this is your opportunity, or the chapter that you can really shine. And then, of course, they really want to see, you know, the evidence for that. And if your district has a site guidance plan, it's perfect. This is the perfect chapter to talk about that. How does the counseling or academic advising program assist students directly with their transition to advanced education opportunities? So do you have externships? Do you take them up to community colleges? Anything like that, this is where you're going to talk about it. And really, they want to know, how does your institution track their transition numbers? So you're going to want to have that that data available, the documentation to be viewed as evidence. And I think the overarching theme here is that you provide support for all students, from the recruitment and the admissions phase to the completion. And part of that is going to be described in the registration process, your pre and post testing. Again, like you mentioned before, there's going to be, a little bit more, you're going to be a little repetitive, but that's okay. This is really foreign to most of them. You're not probably going to get a lot of adult school people, but do you have an orientation process in place? Do students receive copies of the school policy? This is exactly what this chapter is asking for. And if you receive Carl Perkins funds through your school, how do you monitor the student achievement? What kind of student learning goals do you provide at the entry point? The institution regularly evaluates student needs in order to provide support services that increase the likelihood of success for all students. This is an opportunity for you to use your student surveys. How does the institution research and identify the learning support needs of its student population and provide appropriate extracurricular and co-curricular programs whenever possible that meet the needs of its constituency? Again, we were asked quite a bit about this, but I think the biggest question that we got was about the CFAs. They want to see evidence of the common formative assessments. They want to know that the faculty is meeting regularly, and that in those meetings there's evidence of discussion of student data. And this Criterion 7 here is again verbatim. It's right out of that criterion, asking about the security of files with regards to student support services, records, transcripts, that sort of thing. So if you have a policy in place, you can speak to that, and then just have that on reference. Okay, so resource management, Criterion 8, we're almost there. The institution has sufficient resources to offer current educational courses and programs. Has the student stayed within the budget for the past 3 years? Here's your opportunity again to discuss with them where we've come, that we were once ADA driven, now we're not. Many of our schools are relying on just WIA funding or very small programs. This is where you have an opportunity to explain why you're doing what you're doing, and how you're actually providing services with much less money, because it really is pretty amazing what some of the schools are doing. What evidence is there that the institution has sufficient revenues to support the educational improvements? They wanted our last audit from our district, and that was one of the requests within the tool. But when the team got here, and once they really learned about adult school and how it's changed, that request was not made. So it was kind of interesting. And then again, how does that mission statement become an integral part of your fiscal planning process? They want to know that you have transparency and fiscal integrity. And again, these items within Criterion 8 are pretty cut and dried, because you're just going to be providing the financial policies and practices, your evidence of your budget meetings, sign-in sheets, that your budget reflects a realistic assessment of the current financial resources, and that even though we don't know long range where we're going to be, you have a plan for, you're planning to be there even though we don't know. So you've got the vision. And that, to what extent does the governing body and administration receive regular reports on the financial conditions of the institution? They want to know, what are you sharing basically, with your staff? How are they made aware of the changes that your institution is going through. And again, you have to remember that this is being written from the perspective of community college, where they've got shared governance, there's an academic senate, the faculty has a lot more input into the administration and the budget, and so just keep that in mind when you're reading this. How do you connect the short-term and long-term financial planning with the school-wide action plan, identified priorities, and to what extent are institutional funds being used judiciously so that the facilities and support materials are sufficient? And again, many of us are being taken care of by our districts now, so you may want to have your district fiscal or business service person available during the visit if they want to meet with them. They did want to see our NIMS policy, your evacuation plans. They wanted to see the technology inventory. They wanted to look at all MOUs and our lease agreements. We have lots. We probably have 300 MOUs. I mean, we just provided the binder for them to look at so that they could see there was a regular and systematic process in place for updating those and making sure that they're current. We have a large school, so 300 MOUs is, I mean, we serve we're down, I mean, we were at 29,000, so we're at over 17,000 now. I think we served 17,600 last year, and we have an out-of-school youth program, so that's one of the reasons why we have so many MOUs, because little mom and pop businesses will take our students, so it is a lot to keep track of. But again, all they were interested in was there a systematic process in place for the review of those MOUs and for the board to approve those. They wanted to know that your facilities are clean and safe. Some of them are coming from comprehensive, so they're thinking of the Williamson Act, and that we have a great facility, so that really wasn't a concern. But they wanted to see how hard was it for a teacher to take a class into the computer labs, for example. How long was the wait? Were students able to get on easily? They asked for the safety plans and agendas and meeting minutes for the safety meetings, which was kind of surprising. They spent a lot of time here. I really was not, I was prepared for, I had an evidence room set up, even though we were told in our meetings that we didn't have to have an evidence room. I thought, that's nuts. We have this material, so we might as well use it. And they went through it, and they were here late hours. So it was not what I expected, and that's why I really wanted you to see the verbiage, because it's so different. The visit is, the tool is so different, and then that in effect is going to affect your visit, because they're looking at different, I thought they were looking at different items than typically. Okay, so Criterion 9, your community connection. This should be, again, another place for adult school to shine. We have so much involvement from community, businesses, organizations. Most of us all have community leaders that come to our campuses. They do presentations, they're at assemblies. Most of us have externships, job shadowing, things like this. So this should be a slam dunk for most adult schools. They want to know that there are outlets for students in community service or internship opportunities. That was a direct question. How many of our students are out at internships? How many get that that opportunity for that experience? And they wanted to know, this was kind of interesting, what evidence can be provided to indicate the reputation of the institution in the community, and what efforts have been made to connect the school with its community through service programs. And again, we had so many MOUs and facility agreements. The word that they use in the criterion is trust. What evidence of trust is there between the LEA and the community? And I think that you know, your MOUs, your community advisory council, these are all evidence of trust. You know, the community wouldn't be having your students on their campus if they, or at their place of business, if they didn't have trust in the adult school and what you're teaching your students. How does the school use its profile? Chapter 1 of the self-study, to understand and connect to its community. You know, remember in chapter 1, that's where you're going to describe your demographics. You know, how many of your students are unemployed? What are your demographic makeup of your school population? So here's an opportunity for you to bring back chapter 1 into this criterion and talk about that. And again, now we're going to go back to what we started with, the end in mind. So they want to see the connection between your institution and your action plan, and that it's going to reflect the efforts of all stakeholders. And you know, there's different ways to do this, and I actually got this idea from another school. It wasn't actually what they did, but it was talking it through with them that helped us decide how to formulate ours. In that we needed input from all stakeholders. So when I and the other AP, when we had met with the staff in the very beginning, the year before we started our WASC meetings, and we went through the tool, we wrote down our strengths and our areas of concern, the things that we thought we needed to improve on. We held on to those, and as we got to chapter 10, we took those and we made a gallery walk, and we put those within the different departments, and we let them vote on our areas of strength and our areas of weakness. And then that was what really propelled us into our action plan, because we were able to take the gallery walk and display it and allow all faculty to have input. And so from there, you know, everybody felt like they had a voice, and then we voted on it using SurveyMonkey. So once we narrowed it down to the areas that we really felt we needed to improve and where our focus, you know, the action plan would be, then we voted. And from that, we formulated our action plan. So the minutes from those meetings, we had available, we had as evidence the gallery walk, the dots, you know, all the discussions, the SurveyMonkey, all of that was available for them to review so that they could see that all stakeholders had met to discuss the action plan, to give input into its implementation, and to determine the key issues that they felt, you know, that we needed to address in moving the student learning forward. I think we pretty much covered this slide in just what I just finished discussing. The institution has a definitive plan for how the action plan is to be monitored to maintain accountability as well as to report progress to all stakeholders. How does the action plan specify how the improvement efforts will be monitored and who will oversee the process? How will the process be reported to all stakeholders? This is very much like every action plan we've done prior. If you've gone through a WASC before, there isn't a lot of change there, but they do want to see it tied to your SLOs, and so that needs to be, you know, where your ESLers were. You're going to replace with SLOs, the student learning outcome. Okay, and this is again what we just talked about. They want to know that the decisions were made, you know, how they were made, was it top-down, shared governance, that sort of thing. Okay, so Charisse, if we can move this, then if they want to type on the chat, the chat, yeah, and then I can see their questions. Perfect, thank you. I know that's a lot of information. It's a different tool, so I really wanted you to kind of get an opportunity to see the actual verbiage. Okay, you do need you do need to replace your ESLers with the SLOs. You do need the student learning outcomes, and they really have to be threaded throughout your courses of study, the syllabi, just in the same manner that you used the ESLers before, prior to this tool. Our visit was this academic year. We had our visit just prior to spring break, which was perfect timing. I tried to request the timing so that it was the second week of the third quarter, so our classes were full, yet they could see how our assessment process, because we do modified managed enrollment for ESL, so they could actually see us doing the pre-testing, assessments for ESL. So that worked out well for us. I have a question here. What's the student population of my school in terms of ethnicity or numbers? We serve over 17,000. We're largely Hispanic, although we have about probably 9 different ethnicities. We have about 9 different ethnicities on our school. And we began the WASC meetings last year. So we did our meetings. Myself and the other AP met with all the faculty, just certificated staff to begin with, to go through the WASC tool. They all had copies of it, the new one. And then when we finished that took about 8-9 weeks. And when we finished that, we began our WASC focus groups. So we had probably 3 or 4 meetings in the previous year, and then when we began this fall, we started and we alternated between professional learning community meetings and WASC meetings, and we met every other week for an hour. We also released our teachers, so since we are no longer ADA driven and the cost to pay everybody outside of the time that they were here would have been quite high, we went ahead and released them. So we actually did it on Fridays, which you wouldn't think would be a very good day, but our student attendance is a little low that day, so we went ahead and met Fridays, and we get out at 12:30. Normally we got out at 11:30 and met for an hour. And we are on a site that does ROP. They didn't look at ROP, although they were, interested in how that worked, because we share a campus with ROP, special ed, and then we have Discovery, which is 5th-year seniors, and then our school as well, the adult school. So we're 49 acres, approximately. Oh, okay, so Ron, were you here? You were on a visit? We did have a fantastic adult educator out of Ventura, and she was really helpful to educate the team. We also had a gentleman from Porterville, and so that was really helpful that we had those two. They were key, and the chair was wonderful. She was not from adult school, but she came from a school that had an adult ed program on her site within her district, and she was great. We had 6 on our team. So our chair was really wonderful, and then we had 2 strong adult ed teachers. 2 strong adult ed administrators, and then community college, university, ROP. But that's what made it difficult is there was only 2 people that really had that's what made it difficult, is that we had a team that really wasn't familiar with the history. Okay, and in the beginning of my presentation, I'm reading Gustavo's. In the beginning of the presentation, I used the word leadership. Are you talking about in Criterion 1, Gustavo? Yes, yeah, I'm referring to the leadership of our school, our admin team. I think the biggest surprise for me was that in the trainings, the WASC trainings, it sounded as though, you know, you really didn't have to have so much evidence anymore, an evidence room. We definitely had to have evidence. I had a file folder for every criterion and every discussion question, every indicator I responded to with evidence, and if I couldn't provide evidence, I would tell them where the evidence was located. You know, see finance office, or see district, you know, just audit located in district, at district files, or something like that. So I was surprised at how they really combed through the meetings. We kept binders. We've done that for years. So each every focus group, every PLC meeting, every department meeting, every admin meeting, we had a binder. And so, you know, we've done that. We've got, gosh, probably 10 years in storage. You know, that's just something we were trained to do that, to provide that. And if you can keep a record of all the trainings that you send your staff to, that really, you know, you forget about all the things that you attend, all the, like this webinar, you know, we would note that, and we would have it in our Excel spreadsheet. So whenever anybody went to anything, whether it was at the district for training, whether it was a teacher in service, we kept a record and then printed that out for them. We had 6 people on our visiting team. They probably could have had 8 because we have 4 sites, but we're visitors on 2 of those sites. We have a jail education program which they went to. I was very surprised. And we have adults with disability program which they went to. They went to everything. They went to every program we had. They were very, very thorough. I have to say that was very impressive to me, because I felt like, you know, I really wanted an honest evaluation, and you know, I can't say it won't be honest, if, you know, because I know they went everywhere and they really spent a lot of time here. So that, you know, that was a good feeling for me, even though, you know, I wasn't entirely happy with the team at first. You know, I kind of began to understand where they were coming from, and I think they began to understand a little bit about adult ed. So they also took a tour of our facility the very first evening. You know, when you have your reception kind of, and you meet for the very first time on Sunday, they wanted a tour of our site. And I've been on many WASCs, and we've not done tours of the site that evening. Yeah, so 6, I think, you know, for a small school that might be a lot, but for a big school like us, 6, they were working hard. They were tired by the time they left. Are there other questions? I think once you have a chance to go through the tool, you know, and then you go back and look at the slides, you can email me if you have questions. I'll be happy to help any way I can. I will.
All right. I want to thank you, Jody, for the presentation this afternoon. I do think that it was quite comprehensive, quite dense, and I want to make sure that the participants know that we do have the PowerPoint here on this chat pod at the bottom of this screen, so that you can download that and have a copy of it. And early on in the PowerPoint, there was a link also provided. I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top so that you can get that again. but there is a link provided that we have so that the new tool was available for you. And it is right about, let's see, here. I'm going to also put that into the Q&A pod for you, but if you didn't get to see it there, you will see it again here. And I encourage you to download that manual because it has all of the new criterion that will be asked. I think one of the critical pieces that Jody shared with us this afternoon is knowing your team and knowing the visiting team that's coming to your school. You need to be prepared that they may not all be from adult ed and have an adult ed background. And so with that in mind, Jody has given us really the preparation of some of the tips you can have done so that you'll be prepared. Jody, thank you again. At the top of the Q&A, you'll see the webinar survey document. If you can also take a moment there to click on that and give us your feedback, we'd appreciate hearing it from you. Barbara has left her email address there again for you to request certificates. It's bcarruthers@air.org. And then again below that is the PDF document for the manual for 2011. Thank you again very, very much. I appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you, Jody. Again, please feel free to email Jody if you need any further questions or contact. Have a great afternoon, and we'll leave the pod open for you for another few minutes. Thanks. Bye-bye.